بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome everyone. مرحبا بكم. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Murur Safdar. I'm in the NGOs and civil society organization, a specialist at the Islamic Development Bank, and I'm honored to be the master of ceremony for today's webinar, which is on the CSO forum, ensuring inclusiveness and sustainability in development intervention. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to this forum today, happening on the sideline of the ISDB Board of Governors, the 47th annual meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, which is discussing an important topic on enhancing inclusiveness and sustainability for civil society organization. Before going any further, let me take you to some housekeeping notes. So here are some important notes. This is a live webinar through Zoom, and attendees can ask questions through the Q&A tab below in the screen. The chat will be disabled for attendees during the session, and also translations are available, and simultaneous interpretation is available in Arabic and French languages during the whole forum. I would like also to bring to your attention that this session is 1 hour and a half and is being live streamed through YouTube, and the link for the live streaming is posted in the chat box on the right side. So for any person who is connecting through YouTube, you can also post your comments and questions in the chat box on the right side of the YouTube screen. So following is the program of our event. Today's webinar promises to be enlightening and will begin with an opening statement and keynote speech by His Excellency Dr. Mansour Mukhtar, the VP of Operation of the Islamic Development Bank, and by Her Excellency Ms. Niveen El-Kabbaj, Minister of Social Solidarity of Egypt. And then we will have a high-level panel discussion and concluded with the closing remarks by the ISDB Director General of Global Practices, Mr. Amir Bogovic. We would also like to express sincere thanks and appreciation to all our panelists and speakers today for honoring ISDB invitation to share their thoughts and experiences on this very important topic. We will now proceed to the opening remarks delivered by His Excellency Dr. Mansour Mukhtar, the Vice President for Operations Complex at the Islamic Development Bank. Dr. Mansour, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Mr. Niveen El-Kabbaj, Minister of Social Solidarity of Egypt, distinguished speakers and guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure and honor to welcome you all to the ISDB First Civil Society Organizations Forum on enhancing inclusiveness and sustainability in development institutions. The forum is being organized by the Resilience and Social Development Department of the Islamic Development Bank on the sideline of the ISDB 47th Board of Governors annual meeting. Let me begin by thanking Your Excellency Ms. Niveen El-Kabbaj for accepting our invitation to jointly open this important forum. The forum will be an annual event, and it will be used as a platform to discuss critical and important topics, various challenges and issues that are of concern for the civil society and development institutions. I would also like to extend my thanks to the speakers who are going to deliberate on this important topic in the panel session today. Distinguished guests, inclusiveness and sustainability are both significant aspects for the success of any development intervention. They are mutually reinforcing each other We know that building inclusiveness and ensuring sustainability assists in achieving development impact, adapting to the changing communities in which you operate, and addressing disparities in societies that would otherwise impact on all of us negatively. At the Islamic Development Bank, we believe that the role of the civil society organizations is critical in supporting the efforts of member countries' governments to achieve their national development goals and plans. These organizations can enhance social resilience and assist societies in coping with extreme events, as well as playing a critical role in engaging citizens as a foundation for sustainable innovation to be able to cope with today's global challenges. In particular, also, they contribute to the immediate and medium-term efforts of the member countries to prevent, contain, and respond to negative impacts of natural and human disasters. Building inclusive communities is the task of civil society organizations, as they have comparative advantage in closely working with grassroots populations. Improving governance and enhancing functioning of markets alone will not lead to the achievement of the SDGs. It requires inclusive efforts of all stakeholders. Inclusive communities are vital for achieving the SDGs, as well as any mission of the multilateral development banks. Thus, it is of paramount importance to ensure inclusiveness and sustainability measures in our development efforts. Additionally, the SDG agenda of leaving no one behind necessitates the participation and contribution of all actors, including CSOs. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here today to dig deeper and discover best practices followed by development institutions to ensure inclusive and sustainable operations. This forum is in line with the ISDB new strategy and its recently developed strategic priorities, which include boosting recovery, tackling poverty and building resilience, as well as driving green economic growth. In addition, this is in alignment with the bank's civil society engagement policy, which calls for the active engagement and participation of the civil society in our development initiatives and intervention. It is also derived from the ISDB NGO's Empowerment for Poverty Reduction Program and the TEDAMON CSO Pandemic Response Accelerator Program, developed in the framework of the ISDB Group Strategic Preparedness and Response Program for COVID-19 Pandemic, or SPRP. Given that these programs have yielded results on the ground, it is important to learn from the experience of all partners and beneficiaries, and to use these experiences in coming up with effective, sustainable, and inclusive recovery initiatives and recommendations in post-COVID recovery process. Through this 1.5-hour webinar, we will hear from experts representing their respected organizations, including Asian Development Bank, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, Ministry of Social Solidarity of Egypt, Mr. Lakai Foundation of Egypt. We will learn about good practices, lessons learned, and experience in ensuring inclusivity and sustainability in development efforts in the economic and social sectors. And let me take this opportunity to thank the distinguished speakers who accepted our invitation despite their very busy schedules to share with us their wealth of knowledge, experience, and expertise in this very important and timely topic. Finally, I would like to thank the colleagues of the ISDB Civil Society Engagement Team for their dedication and hard work, which has helped brought us together today, a diverse group, and bringing along a diverse group of speakers to enlighten and educate us about how we can better empower CSOs to deliver successful interventions to our economics. I wish you a successful webinar, and I do look forward to the fruitful outcomes of this important gathering. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President, for this important and informative statement, and also for highlighting the vital role that civil society sector play to achieve impactful development interventions. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to invite now Her Excellency, Mrs. Niveen El-Kabbaj, Minister of Social Solidarity of Egypt, to give her keynote speech. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be with you today. Thank you a lot for the invitation in this honorable meeting. Mr. Dr. Mansour Mukhtar, Vice President of Operations for the Islamic Development Bank, and Mrs. Heidi Deputy, Head NGO and Civil Society Center, Asian Development Bank. Esteemed participants, it gives me great pleasure to be with you today to participate in the opening of the Islamic Development Bank's first CSO Forum on enhancing sustainable and inclusive development interventions. And I would like to highlight the issue of sustainability as we're all heading to the achievement of SDGs and in Egypt 2030, which have a great importance from the political leadership and from all of the country institutions, including NGOs and CSOs, and also inclusion in an era where the rights are mostly recognized, the rights of the people all to participate in the public decision-making and in development, including women, young people, people with disabilities. So I'd like to reiterate the word inclusion, and I highly appreciate including it to have all inclusive development, including also the rights of the environment, especially that we are waiting for COP27 to be soon in Egypt. I would like to dedicate my speech today to honor the vital role of civil society in Egypt and their importance, the achievement of their honorable development action that we see and we really feel the impact throughout the years. Its impact was really felt and indicated, especially post-COVID-19 pandemic and its severe socio-economic consequences. Reiterating our sincere beliefs in the fundamental importance of SDG number 17, which focuses on partnership at any level. Partnerships for the goals encapsulates the impactful path of partnerships, international, regional, national, local, act as catalyst, driver, and safe route to the peak of the implementation of SDGs. We're very keen also to extend our partnerships to local communities and to highlight community participation and community monitoring. Throughout the history, the government of Egypt has also acknowledged the great efforts of and contribution of civil society organizations towards the achievements of NGO of development agenda in Egypt. Lately, we issued the Egypt law number 149 for year 2019, which has introduced a paradigm shift in the vision of the government of the role of civil society, and which redesigns its partnership and its collaboration with civil society as a vital partner with the private sector. The government reiterates the role of civil society organizations and their anticipated potential upon the declaration of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi of year 22 as the year of civil society. The Ministry of Social Solidarity is investing more and more efforts to support further facilitation, consolidation, and strengthening of the practice of CSOs in Egypt, and also to strengthen the networking amongst civil society organizations, including the big ones and the CSO, which is the civil society organizations at the rural and at remote areas level, which actually asserts the issue and the value of inclusion in Egypt, and ensuring the alignment and integration between the priorities of the government in Egypt and the on-ground interventions of civil society. The ministry has launched its electronic network, its comprehensive digital platform, which was the first time to launch in Egypt for registry, for monitoring CSOs, and also for reporting on the results. Actually, it reflects the transparency that the government wants the civil society organizations to be open and to extend the role, because the law is actually not controlling, but rather than organizing. And it's built on extending trust between the two parts and between civil society, not only with the government, but with the local communities. Actually, the registry and the monitoring of CSO practices, it happens only the registry in 1 week to support the automation of reporting and service provision by NGOs, and also to calculate and to register on the beneficiaries, and to have clustering of different sectors to work together and to promote partnerships among the same sector, and maximizing the impact of NGOs' interventions throughout efficient targeting of regions, services, and beneficiaries. As we embark upon the presentation of Islamic Development Bank NGO Empowerment for Poverty Reduction Program is becoming more and more important, especially with Tadamun CSO's Pandemic Response Accelerator program results. Very high respect and appreciation for Tadamun, and we're very positive about the future, about the impact that is expected to be through Tadamun, especially in that era of socio-economic difficulties that all the world is witnessing. I would like to reflect on Egypt's best practices and successful development experiences implemented in partnership with civil society in Egypt. The Ministry of Social Solidarity, in partnership with more than 9,000 NGOs, is implementing the socio-economic components of the presidential initiatives Hayat Karima. Hayat Karima is Decent Life. It's a big national program that is targeting to develop the rural areas and to suffice the services that are not sufficient for the previous time, not efficient, not sufficient, and that's what we're trying to do, is to avail decent life for all people living in Egypt, including rural areas and remote areas. So it's a presidential initiative, Hayat Karima. It also includes social behavioral change, development of social service hubs, extending protection to women, children, people with disabilities, and economic empowerment of the most vulnerable groups. The presidential program adopts a comprehensive and inclusive approach to development through targeting around 58% of the population in 4,500 villages in 20 governorates. And the total cost of the program reaches 700 billion Egyptian pounds. Actually, it reflects how much important this program is and how much the government is keen to provide decent life for all people living, especially in rural areas that were deprived from lots of services during the previous times. During the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, MOS has developed and implemented a comprehensive socio-economic response plan that caters the priorities and emergency areas of interventions to support the most vulnerable groups throughout the pandemic in partnerships with its national and international organizations. The Egyptian economy has performed better than expected despite the corona pandemic, thanks to the support provided by the Egyptian government, by the economic reform program that took place just before the pandemic, which protected Egypt at that time, and also thanks to the social responsibility of the private sector, of the banking sector that backed up Egypt, and very special thanks to civil society and the power of the giving of Egyptian civil society and volunteers. MOS, in partnerships with more than 3,000 NGOs, managed to extend social assistance and relief services to the most affected and most vulnerable groups for the precautions of COVID pandemic, with aggregate number of 20 million beneficiaries and a total cost of nearly 500 billion Egyptian pounds. Intervention varied between, 5 billion Egyptian pounds. Interventions varied between assistance directed to families, cash assistance, monthly transfers, settlement of installments, in-kind transfers, food packages, medication, hot meals, bed linens, provision of personal protection equipment, medicine. The support was very much comprehensive in all of Egypt. Support to medical facilities, support to local communities, and also PPEs to the medical staff. Added to the awareness and the protection of people who are recovering from addiction and women who are pregnant, like lactating women, and people with disabilities. Finally, the ministry adopts an empowerment approach to graduate the beneficiaries of its social protection programs, the conditional cash transfer, that now reach 4.1 million households, summing up to 17 million individuals, and protection and dependence to production, moving from protection to production, and generating livelihoods. We are developing a unified database between us and the NGOs, and between us and Zakat committees, in order to ensure that we all have a unified social protection and cash assistance to people, mentioning people with the ID number, in order to assure and to verify that no one receives double assistance and another person doesn't receive anything. Actually, through Forza is Opportunity, which is the biggest economic empowerment program in Egypt, or in Ministry of Social Solidarity. The ministry supports the economic empowerment of beneficiaries through three main components, including first, behavioral change, then economic financial literacy, financial inclusion, project management, and other training issues which prepares them to joining the labor market, and then availing either loans or for self-labor, or training them to join the labor market, wage labor. This is ultimately to graduate them successfully and smoothly to a better social level, achieving effective social mobility patterns. It was the constant cooperation with civil society organizations that the program steadily approaches its primary outcomes. Now we reach around 340,000 projects, summing up to the whole of Egypt, with special focus on Hayat Karima, with a total cost of 2.8 billion Egyptian pounds. One example of the economic empowerment interventions is our minister's collaboration with the Orman Association to provide 4,000 micro projects with a total cost of 80 million. So it's only one NGO, but we have multiple organizations with NGOs. You know, finally, I would like just to mention that we have, in Egypt, we have around 36,000 registered on our electronic network, and we are expecting to reach, because we are having the new settlements of the NGOs, especially after issuance of the NGO law and its bylaws. Laterally and finally, I can state that we are privileged with the activities and proactivity of civil society organizations that is working with us now on a big program that's called WHY program. Why is awareness, and we are working not only on the hardware, but on the software of communities, on the power of the software values. Also awareness issues, especially that comes to early marriage, to FGM, to early detection of disabilities, to right of the environment, to literacy classes, to combating violence against women, combating drugs and substance abuse. So awareness programs is a big program that extends to 12 messages throughout the collaboration with NGOs that we are seeking to reach 4,000 households. Finally, I'm full of hope that the endeavors shall pay off towards a world that is prosperously and sustainably developed. I'm very positive about partnership with the Islamic Development Bank. I wish you all the best, not only in the Tadamun program, but all the programs that you are leading. And we avail ourselves to support, to give any kind of support, of collaboration, of data, or information that we'd like to have in Egypt, in order to make your life easier, and also to make larger and impactful work that the NGOs do in Egypt, and especially with our international organizations and banks. Thanks a lot for inviting me. It was an honor being with you, and looking forward to collaborate and to work with each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your speech, and thank you also for shedding the light on the excellent efforts and the programs and outcomes of those programs that the Egyptian government is extending to the civil society sector in Egypt to support the most vulnerable groups and the rural areas in the country, especially to recover from the pandemic. And thank you also for your support to the ISTB programs, especially the Tadamun Accelerator Program. Thank you very much for having you with us today. And we also look forward to strengthen our collaboration with the civil society in Egypt, and also the government as well. So, dear guests and our esteemed speakers, We will now proceed to the core panel discussion for today. I'm delighted to invite Mr. Abdi Abdullahi, Head of the Social Development Section in the Resilience and Social Development Department, who will be our moderator for the session. Mr. Abdi Abdullahi is currently overseeing fragility, resilience, civil society engagement, youth and women empowerment in ISDB member countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, Middle East, and Europe. He has led the development of the first ever ISDB policies and strategies addressing fragility, building resilience, empowering civil society, and reducing disaster risk. He has initiated also and led transformative initiatives serving the civil society, such as the NGO Empowerment for Poverty Reduction Program, the Economic Empowerment Programs for Refugees and hosting communities, and the ISDB Resilience Index, and a lot more. So welcome, Brother Abdi. The floor is yours to start the panel discussion for today's forum.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon and good morning wherever you are. Let me first thank to Bruj for moderating, and I will also like to thank His Excellency Dr. Mansour Mukhtar, the Vice President of Operations of the Islamic Development Bank, and Her Excellency Mrs. Naveen for making these excellent opening remarks. This session is a very important one that covers a very important and timely issues that is facing the civil societies in our member countries. I would like to start by first welcoming you all and thank the speakers for their availability to participate and contribute to this important forum, which will shed the light on exploring the best practices to ensure inclusive and sustainability in development efforts in the economic and social sectors led by the civil society organizations. I would like to inform you that we have 4 speakers who will deliberate this important topic and share with us their experience, best practices, as well as lessons learned. We have a very limited time, which is around 40 minutes to deliberate this important issue. I will first start to give the floor to each speaker based on alphabetical order, and I will ask one question and a follow-up question to each speaker to address and contribute to the plenary discussions that will focus on the civil society inclusiveness and sustainability of their interventions. I will then, once I finish all the speakers, I will then open the floor for discussions, comments, and questions. And there will be also an opportunity where the participants can ask specific questions to a specific speaker or towards all the speakers. So with that note, given the limited time, allow me to first introduce you our first speaker, who is going to be Atif Al-Shaprawi, who is currently economic empowerment advisor at the World Bank and the Egyptian government. Atif served as an expert at UNDP Iraq, consultant to KSA Mashat program, and also as an SDG expert at the UNDP Bahrain. He is a COO of a family bank Bahrain, social development advisor to Bahrain government. He was a manager at the Bahrain Development Bank, director at the Egyptian Social Fund for Development, advisor to Centennial Fund in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, national team leader of Bahrain Sustainable Development Goals, and founder of socialinnovativeexpert.com. Let me thank Atif for his availability to join us. And I will first start by asking him the first question, first to share with us the main challenge facing the government of Egypt to achieve inclusive recovery and development through the CSOs. Brother Atif, you have 5 minutes to share with us your thoughts, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Abdi, for the introduction, and I really appreciate being a part of this event under the patronage of Her Excellency Dr. Niveen Al-Qabbash. Thanks to Dr. Mansour for his leadership for the important event and having us within this kind of sphere where everyone now is talking about the role of NGOs and CSOs. In fact, to reply your question, I guess Her Excellency Dr. Niveen gave a wide scope of introduction regarding what the Egyptian government is doing in partnership with the CSO and NGO in Egypt. I will just summarize to let shed in four main challenges. In fact, as far as Her Excellency mentioned that the globality of what the ministry is doing. Let's say that the government in Egypt is really seeing the CSO and NGOs are the real partner in that kind, what we call it today in Egypt, the new republic, where we have to reach a lot of missed development stages, and we have to be quick and efficient. I will focus on four major challenges. The first one is to try to assure a proper ecosystem for the development of CSO and NGOs. The proper ecosystem will be modernized. The law already, the government modernized the law, and let's say that in Egypt today, an NGO and CSO can open an enterprise. And this is a breakthrough for the sustainability, particularly the financial sustainability. So the proper ecosystem will be to have a new law. The ministry is launching an academy for the capacity building of CSO, reforming a national fund for NGO, and particularly giving that kind of space for the NGOs to be as an element of the implementation, as Her Excellency mentioned, and I will come later, for the size of implemented a project done by the NGO in Egypt, which is tremendous. So the first one will be to assure a proper ecosystem. The second one, to assure coordination. Imagine that in Egypt we have more than 50,000 NGOs, and those NGOs are working in a huge sphere where we have to assure not only the kind of coordination between the government, the private sector, the NGOs, but also between NGOs, big one and small one, CSOs and in areas, CDIs in some small village. We have to assure not only the coordination in the action, but also in the resources. Her Excellency mentioned that the ministry has developed a database of more than 35 million individual. Currently, all people are working, getting the social welfare system in or out. They are recorded. So we have a huge database which we can share it. The new law is also getting this incentivizing the NGOs to have a more coordination. The third point, a challenge for the NGOs and for the government also, is to have that kind of scale up of action. I mean, huge projects are undertaken now. We are changing what we call it, the implementation modality. Let's say that for economic inclusion today, World Bank talks about the value chain implementation, group enterprises, social enterprises. We talk about social innovation. We talk about training ended by job placement. A lot of new things which are not the classical practice of NGOs in Egypt, who are coming from a long term of charitable and emergency action, where most of the time we were delivering things without following. And the last point will be the modernization of digitalization. And digitalization will be also a huge sense of responsibility for NGOs, who will be having a huge database linked to the ministry. We will be able to get the feedback, the impactful action. Today, if NGOs are providing services or helpful efforts for a lot of people, they are not having a real database about the beneficiary. So we are not able to track what's happening for them. How can the intervention of CSO are impactful? So this last point, which is digitalization, will come to kind of sustainable innovation in their work and also in their contribution to the society. So the Egyptian government is looking to the CSOs as a real player, where different challenges are coming to, in fact, to maximize the impact of their role. I hope that I kept 5 minutes.
Thank you, Adif. This is really a very good summary on the role and also the contribution of the government of Egypt experience in supporting and dealing with civil societies. You have mentioned very important points which are really relevant to also the programs of the Islamic Development Bank mentioned by His Excellency, the Vice President, the NGO Empowerment Program, and Tadamun, particularly the issue of digitization and also ensuring proper database that really provides a very good information and data about the CSO. So in this case, I would like to ask you a follow-up question on what is the role of the CSOs in designing and contributing to the national development plans, because including the CSOs and also the civil societies in the national development plans requires their involvement from the get-go. So what is your experience by involving the civil society organizations in the national development plans, and how active they are to contribute to achieve the national development aspirations and goals? Over to you, Atif.
Yeah, in fact, as a first part, Her Excellency mentioned the contribution of CSO in different projects in Egypt. I will focus on economic inclusion and economic empowerment. Let's say that today we are empowering needy people and poor people with different level of intervention, with more sustainable, more efficient and impactful action. So the change in the modality and the models of economic inclusion are one of the crucial theories of change of the development and sustainable development today. So we are starting by focusing in capacity building of NGOs. So for the first time, for example, we are training all our NGOs who are working exclusive in economic inclusion. How can they design a value chain for 400? We have an example in one village where we give 400 ladies 120 chips per lady, and they are producing eggs, about 60,000 eggs per day. This kind of activity is not really the normal activity or charitable or even very small trust activity. So it is kind of professional activity. So we start by putting a programs, capacity building program based on need, like how can we design a value chain? How can we design a relation with a factory who needs employees? NGOs normally are training unemployed people, but they are not entering in the job placement and follow-up of the process itself. So the ministry and the government is proposing with certain partners like international organization, FAO, WFP, but also organization who are working capacity building, very specific program, how to design a program. We consider that an NGO today should be sustainable, should have the sustainable financial ability, but works also within a business model where they can identify the need and demand. The relation with the private sector. Her Excellency mentioned that the ministry is facilitator as well for the collaboration. We are partnering and initiating a lot of contact with union of business people, for example, union of bankers or CSR and banks, where the ministry is taking the lead to ensure that kind of resources. Let's focus on one point. Our example in economic inclusion, we have today about 3-4 projects. You can imagine one. Her Excellency mentioned Haya Karima. The budget of Haya Karima is 700 billion Egyptian pound, and it touches 60% of Egyptian population. Her Excellency mentioned about 9,000 NGOs. We are now working in the 3 level. We work in institutionalizing the economic empowerment mechanism, which should be replicable by the NGOs. We organize the capacities of NGOs to manage and to fund and to resource, because most of our projects are funded by the government. So the NGOs here are implementing agents. We focus in the third part, which is the relation between the NGOs and the private sector. If we talk about economic and sustainable development, we need the NGOs to learn from the private sector, to replicate and imitate. We have one example now we will integrate very soon that will have a small abundant factory which belonging to the private sector. We will have an NGO who will be managed the factory industry under the umbrella of private sector within the money of our government, which is economic empowerment money. So we look for sustainable, scalable, sustainable innovation. So NGOs are today, they don't have the capabilities to foresee that, and the role of the government, the role of most Ministry of Social Solidarity in Egypt today is to be that kind of boosting the ecosystem, spreading the best practices according to what's going on in the best countries in the world, and try to raise the level of NGOs. And last point, giving the NGOs a huge market access. I mean, if we can count the number of projects which are under the management of CSOs and NGOs in Egypt today, you will find that few hundreds of Egyptian billions, not millions, are managed 100% by the NGOs. So now the NGOs are coming to fill in the gap of having very little behind areas in Egypt where the new republic in Egypt is trying to revamp it simultaneously and in the same time. And no one can reach every single area, every single corner in Egypt better than the NGOs.
Thank you, Dr. Adif, for your elaboration and explanation. I will come back to you with some questions from the speakers. We have already received some questions, but I will, for the interest of the time, I will go to the other speakers. Before I go to the other speakers, let me take this opportunity to have a group photo. I was asked by the organizing team to ask you to open all your cameras, so that we will be able to have a group photo before the VP and also Her Excellency Mrs. Naveen leaves us. So let's have this photo, inshallah, very quickly. So can any one of you, every one of you, open their camera, please? 1 minute. Our colleagues from TIQA, would you be able to take the group photo? Please let us know when you take the photo so that we can proceed.
Yes, sir. On the count of 3, gentlemen, everyone in the panelists, please smile. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So let me now go to our second speaker, who will also share with us the experience of one of the MDBs. The first speaker is Haida Singh, who is from the Asian Development Bank. She is the head of the NGOs and Civil Society Center at the Asian Development Bank. Currently, she's leading the bank's engagement with the civil society organizations. Through the Civil Society Center, its institutions have a wide network of staff in the operations and provide its institutional coordination, technical support to mainstream citizens engagement, CSOs engagement, and CSOs collaborations for the development effectiveness. And I have seen that Asian Development Bank has been very active, Mrs. Haida, and have been doing quite a lot in engaging with the civil society organizations. And there is a very good and well-structured system. We would like to have that experience be shared with us today. I would like to know, how are you going to address the challenges and opportunities of the CSOs to have more inclusive and sustainable development interventions led by the civil society organizations? So Haida, the floor is yours. Please try to answer the question. You have only 5 minutes, and then I will try and ask you also one more question before I go to the next speaker. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Mansour and Excellency Naveen, for giving a really wonderful introduction of the breadth of work that the government of Egypt is doing to reach the poor, and in collaboration with civil societies. Here at ADB, we've been engaging with civil society. We have, since the policy of ADB, cooperation with civil society since the 1990s, 1998. We've taken the approach both through the policy discussion and the operations and mainstreaming of civil society participation in ADB projects, because we believe that through cooperation with civil society, it can be a way to strengthen our project quality and also civil society has the knowledge and the capacity to reach groups that normally would not be able to be reached in the mainstream project. So we think that there's a really important role for civil society to play in contributing to development effectiveness and ensuring social and economics inclusion. ADB has been keeping tracks of the level of civil society participation in projects, and we report on it yearly, and it's part of our development effectiveness reporting. And we've actually introduced recently citizens engagement as a new indicators for us to keep track of. So the NGO and Civil Society Center works with our colleagues in the operations department to really monitor closely the projects that's developed, and to make sure that we provide the technical expertise and support our colleagues in areas where in projects that really need to have civil society engagements, and the role and the value addition of civil society is taken on into the project design and project implementation. Now, with that said, some of the challenges our colleagues encounter, as well as civil society who work with us encounter, is the capacity and resource issue. A lot of civil society face the challenges of having staff that can be retained for a long time, because they are dependent on fundings and finding business opportunities to continue the good work that they do. So resourcing civil society groups is a challenge, and the sustainability of groups is a challenge. I think this is a questions that all of us MDBs need to talk and figure out, what should be the sustainability model for civil society. And civil society groups are actually concerned about this area. In some countries, government provides some part of their budget to support civil society groups work, particularly the operation civil society groups. But in ADB, we are doing what we can to build capacity and reach out to civil society so that they can understand ADB business processes, so then they can better access the call for proposal or call for interest in helping to implement projects and things like that. So this is an area of work that we recognize as needing more to do in this area. After the COVID-19 pandemic, if we look at the social protection work that ADB did, we delivered over 20 billion plus of programs and projects through government funding of our member countries. And many of it actually has engagement with civil society groups as well. And it goes to expanding the social protection of most vulnerable people in the region. However, that's not enough. I was just looking at the area of work that is of interest to many civil society groups. That is the area of poverty reduction and working with the most vulnerable to make sure that they don't get left behind in the Sustainable Development Goals. And I noted that the ILO Social Protection Report from 2020 to 2022 stated that despite all the unprecedented worldwide expansion of social protection during the COVID-19 crisis, more than 4 billion people around the world still remain entirely unprotected. And some of the areas of investment where developing member countries need to do more of is investing in social protection of vulnerable groups, such as covering unemployment, strengthening the some of the programs that support families with poor families, children in marginal circumstances, or family in difficult income level. So these are some of the challenges we're advocating for more expansions of social protection work. Particularly if we look at the global figures, the developed countries spends quite a sizable sum. The percentage is very, the disparity between the low-income countries and the developed countries. Of course, the Europe and Central Asia spends about 84% of their people, actually 84% of the people are covered at least in one benefit for social protection, and in Asian Pacific, I think it's about 44% are covered. So we have a lot of work to do, particularly for budgeting for social protection work, which is an area that is very much has an interest for civil society groups as they work with vulnerable groups. So I think going forward, we would like to see more investments in the area of protecting workers and protecting children and vulnerable families from falling through the cracks after the COVID-19 pandemic. So that would help to the recovery of the sustainability for vulnerable population. But at the same time, it would also open up space for civil society to engage in multilateral finance programs and government engagement with civil society group to help address vulnerable groups. Some of the challenges is to demonstrate to government the value addition of civil society, and that's something that we would like to engage more with our member countries to demonstrate the value addition of engaging with citizens and engaging with civil society group. So I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heidi, for shedding the light to the experience of the Asian Development Bank and how Asian Development Bank is contributing to mainstream the role of the civil societies in development programs and projects. And I think these are very important, particularly the issues that you have highlighted, the issue of social protection as a result of the negative impact of the COVID-19 on the workers and also the most vulnerable groups. I would like to ask you more on how are you going to contribute to strengthen the capacity of the CSOs, which you have rightly mentioned that they are facing critical challenge when it comes to issues capacity. What are the practical experience of the Asian Development Bank in strengthening the capacity of the CSOs? If you could shed the light one or two concrete examples, that would be great. Over to you, Aida.
Okay, thank you. We've recently, in response to COVID-19, we had put together a technical assistance paper to work with, calling for proposal from civil society groups to engage in the program to help support CSO for to provide services in 3 areas: community-based mitigation and prevention activities, and social protection for vulnerable communities, including the elderly care and economic support to those lives who had been affected by COVID-19. This was a regional technical assistance that NGO and Civil Society Center had collaborated closely with our colleagues in the operations to design a regional technical assistance that's called Mitigating the Impact of COVID-19 through Community-Led Interventions. So that allows for civil society to put together proposals and submit it to ADB, and we've selected the proposal from civil society groups, and now they're currently implementing the projects in their communities and in the countries of concern. We're currently working on another technical assistance that actually will provide support to our colleagues in the country offices so that they can dialogue with government civil society focals in government offices to see what can be done in order to help mainstream some of the engagement of civil society and citizens into government policy making process or government projects that aims to reach at vulnerable groups. So we're in the process of designing another technical assistance to collaborate closely with civil society and to engage with groups who have reaches into communities and places that we normally would not be able to reach, and by adding value to their own countries through helping to deliver some of these policy dialogues or engaging in programs and projects of their countries. So that by doing that, we're hoping that it would reach the satisfy the sustainable development goals, helping communities to be mobilized so that they can be the agent of change in their own communities to help advance their local communities' development. So that's what we're looking to do. We're looking to do more to support our colleagues in the operation. ADB just recently published a source book. It's called CSO Engagement Source Book. That we put out on the website. I'll put the link here for our colleagues and for our member countries to use on how to incorporate civil society into the project. We'll be rolling out training on that and how to engage civil society at the project level. Additionally, a few years ago, we produced a primer for civil society groups, and it's actually an explanation of how civil society can find opportunities to engage with ADB and ADB finance projects. So I'll be putting the links to those resources here, and please feel free to use it and distribute it and share it within your organization and within your constituencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Haida. Thank you. That was really very informative, and thanks for also sharing this very important document source book for the CSOs, as well as also the prime for civil society organizations. These are very important tools. Often we talk about the issue of capacity development and also the challenge the CSOs are facing and how they can benefit from the MDB's work. And I think these kind of tools will help them practically connect with the right people and the right departments and units within the organization. So thank you very much for your highlight. Now, our next speaker is coming from the civil society organizations themselves, who will also share with us their experience from the grassroots point of view. How do they want to really contribute and ensure inclusive and sustainable development programs and interventions? So let me introduce you Mohammed Abdurrahman, who is the COO of Misr Al Khair, leading a strong team of professionals and contributing to around yearly 1.5 billion pounds UNESCO prize-winning organizations, and getting this organization is to be #1 in Egypt for the past consecutive years on different levels. He built there are several new functions, departments, and unities that are very critical for the organization, in addition to being fully responsible for the formulation and implementation of 2 out of 3 rounds of strategy with their fully fledged plans, strategic objectives and tactics, budgets, and their association and organizational structure. So Mohammed Abdurrahman, welcome. And I would like to first ask you to share your experience and thoughts on how we can really strengthen the sustainability and make the development interventions more inclusive through the civil society organizations. We would like to have more on concrete experience from the civil society point of view. Over to you, Abdurrahman. And you have 5 minutes. After that, I will try and ask one more question before I go to the next speaker. So over to you. Please welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Abdi. I'm honored to be with you today among colleagues of the development community, and of course, being in the same session with you, Dr. Naveen, Dr. Mansour, Mr. Ayman, and the rest of the colleagues. Coming back to your question and our experience as the part of the civil society, what can be done to make sure that sustainability of operations in the interventions that most of the international or the local NGOs are dealing with. My experience is in Egypt, in Sudan, in Yemen, in Jordan, in Iraq. So I will basically come with several points to be addressed for the civil society in general, not in Egypt per se. There are many factors that we all need to work on to ensure that sustainable development is happening. There are factors that hinder the sustainable development, including political, social, and economic elements. One of the major things that everybody needs to highlight and work on is the political instability. Sustainable development cannot be achieved under political instability. If we are witnessing what is happening in the world right now and have been happening for several years before, we cannot prove that there is and there will be sustainable development unless political instability is addressed. The second thing is poor planning. We need to make sure that we give a lot of resources and time for planning, proper planning. Sustainable development entails the adoption of approaches and plans which call for multidisciplinary interaction involving all relevant disciplines and ministries simultaneously. In some countries, and I have witnessed that myself, that some ministries in countries are not even aligned together. So if the government is really not aligned, what about the civil society being aligned with the government and with everybody else? Again, coming back to policies and strategies, having inappropriate or insufficient policies and strategies, they should be formulated in relation to the objectives to be achieved. Sometimes what is written is far from what is needed and being implemented. Again, another thing to be addressed is weak legal and legislative support of development programs. There is need everywhere in my region, in the region, for economic incentives and legal and legislative instruments as a backup for development projects. In Egypt, there has been a great support from the government, like Dr. Naveen Al-Qabbaj has mentioned in her speech, that the government is really doing its utmost and a very big project, Haya Karima, to make sure that the platform is really easy for everyone to work through it. Social economic restrictions as well. Sustainable development should include and think about the deficiencies facing people, like education, access to training, lack of effective campaigns of enlightenment, guidance, unfavorable economic conditions, and of course, access to financial support. So if these points and these elements are addressed, sustainability can definitely be achieved.
Thank you, Mohammed, for the elaboration of the role of the local civil society. As you know, local organizations always face critical challenges when it comes to sustainability of their interventions, and often their programs and projects depending on external funding that really might not necessarily all the time follows and reach out the NGOs, or because of the limited resources available outside. So we would like to know more about on how are you ensuring the sustainability of your interventions, both exit strategy as well as also ensuring continuation of these programs that addresses the needs of hard-to-reach communities and the most vulnerable groups in your respective area. Over to you.
Great. That was a question that the foundation, my foundation, Masr Khair, had to answer back 15 years ago when the foundation was first started in Egypt. And basically the sustainability issue and the financial sustainability issue in particular. So starting the foundation with its programmatic and thematic interventions, we had parallel to that, our investment department, the investment part of the foundation, which uses the sadaqah donations, getting these sadaqah donations in projects that are profit-oriented in the sense of getting profit back to support the foundation and the programs we work on. So basically that is one of the things that we are working on, trying to get other NGOs to think like we are thinking and do like we are doing. We cannot have financial sustainability just by writing proposals to donors and international organizations. In addition to that, being sustainable in other sense of the community sustainability, sometimes what is implementing is not the priority. So basically some plans of some international donors that we work with and we are proud to be working with, they have their own plans and they have their own priorities, which not always matches with the priority of the community. So basically what we are trying to do is to do the opposite. We build from bottom up. So basically, what is the exact needs of the community? We have, in collaboration with Dr. Naveen and the Ministry of Social Solidarity, we do have one of our programs, which is the NGO development. And Dr. Naveen was gracious to attend our third round of, and she presented the prizes to the NGOs that worked for the past year on one of the SDGs objectives. So basically, we are trying to get the NGOs to have the way to think about sustainability, whether it is community, whether it is programmatic and thematic, or whether it is financial sustainability.
Thank you, Mohammed. I think these are very, very important points that require a lot of discussions and deliberations because of the importance of the important role of the civil societies to actively participate to ensure that development programs and projects are more inclusive and leaving no one behind. I will come back to you in the later stage. There are maybe some questions from the participants and also other people who are following us virtually. Let me now go to our final speaker, who is also coming from another multilateral development bank, Olina Koval, who is head of the private sector partnership and civil society engagement at EBRD. EBRD is European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Olina, in her current role, she manages the bank's engagement with the civil society organizations and other various civic space stakeholders, private sector philanthropist players. Olina has been with the EBRD for over 20 years. Prior to moving into the partnership, Olina was with the Business Development Unit, serving as the EBRD Head of Business Development from 2010 until 2017. Olina has a Master in Computer Science from Lviv State Polytechnic University, Ukraine, and a Master of Research in Information Management from the University of North London. She also graduated from Executive Strategic Marketing Management Program at Chicago Booth Business School. Prior to joining EBRD, Olina has worked in the Ukraine public sector and in public relations management in the UK. Olina, welcome. And let me start to ask you our first question. How, as an MDB, for example, European Reconstruction and Development Bank experience in terms of ensuring that development interventions contribute to the resilience and sustainability of civil society organizations? And you have 5 minutes, Olina. I will try and ask you also a follow-up question that I will give you 2 minutes to answer after you answer the first question. So let me give you the floor. Over to you, Olina.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abdi. Thank you very much, our colleagues from Islamic Development Bank, for inviting EBRD to speak at this important event. And of course, I would like to extend a gratitude to Dr. Mansour and Her Excellency Dr. Nevin also for chairing this important session. Even though that we are called European Bank, but as you might know, we're also operating in South Mediterranean countries and Central Asian countries. So these topics and discussions on civil society, resilience and sustainability is really important in that region for us. But maybe I will start from looking back in the last 3 years that even most unorthodox thinkers could not have predicted what turmoils and extremes the world would have to live in this last 36 months. We have faced the global pandemic that took millions of lives. We have witnessed global economy almost green to halt, completely reshaping the traditional supply chain. And we only witnessed that most of the regions with remote working and digital solutions making businesses more resilient and agile. And then with the international community, when we could have worked on the present challenges, the world faced the next biggest security risks in the World War II, when Russia invaded Ukraine in February 24th. And of course, for civil societies worldwide, the international communities and MDBs, it only means one thing, that we need to be even more coordinated, even more focused, and even more outspoken. And in times of crises like this that we lived through in the last 3 years, elevating community engagement to authentic partnerships is particularly important. The civil society organizations are our entry point to communities, and MDBs, EBRD, including Islamic Development Bank and others, as well as our clients and of course governments, cannot get prepared to this new set of challenges only through being effective and measuring risks in their businesses. They also must secure the social license to operate. And economists, political scientists, and others have long understood that the importance of communities. They anchor people in human networks, provide a sense of identity, create social capital, and of course, build trust. However, we see that communities are in decline in many countries, and civic space and civic life is still being built up in others. So development or efforts can only be effective if they have the support and buy-in from all the key stakeholders. And we are talking about local communities, NGOs, and other civic space contributors. Coming back to the COVID-19 pandemic, which posed additional challenges to the functioning of the state, of markets and communities, as well as highlighted the importance of digitalization. During the pandemic, we at the EBRD conducted over 20 consultations in our countries where we operate with civil society organizations to understand how pandemic affected civil societies and communities, the most vulnerable one. But what is more important for us to understand how EBRD can contribute and help to rebuild the resilience of civil societies on the ground. And during this consultation, digital transformation of civil societies was identified as the principal area of concern, and this is where EBRD started to intervene. We supported civil societies in early 2021 and launched a first pilot project to support digital transformation. We started this project in Turkey, and capacity enhancement project was focusing on addressing skills gaps and really transforming digital solutions that civil societies were operating. We're also focusing now on scaling up this program into other countries' operations, particularly in South Mediterranean region as well. But going back to Ukraine, many issues aggravated with Russia war in Ukraine, which affected other countries, and we are talking about food and energy security, of course, migrant flows, and its associated challenges of inclusivity. And whilst we still remain all the pre-existing challenges topical and in sometimes even more severe. The war on Ukraine has demonstrated for us the importance of civil society, both responding to humanitarian crisis, documenting the war crimes, and supporting refugees with social and economic integration in the affected countries' economies. And their role will only advance after the war in the reconstruction phase. Unfortunately, we already had such experience operating during Syrian war and refugees crisis in the neighboring countries. So we were trying to replicate certain lessons learned in the current crisis, involving civil societies at the earliest stage as possible and building resilience of the communities. In Ukraine as well, in the countries affected by Ukraine refugees crisis, and we are talking mostly of European countries, of course, working and supporting civil society's resilience and sustainability is really vital for the EBRD because they are the first ones that providing this support. We started to work with various NGOs and civil societies to support the coordination efforts and to address specific aspects of this crisis. Also, under the resilience and livelihood package for Ukraine, and affected countries, we are launching several projects supporting economic opportunities and social inclusion of Ukrainian war refugees, enhancing CSOs' capacity and building partnership with them that will be a center efforts for all of us. And of course, supporting civil societies will be crucial during the reconstruction phase. As NGOs in the country and globally will be and can be an important drivers and watchdogs for the transparency and accountability and efficiency of the use of reconstruction funds. Overall, I probably will say just one last sentence. Civil societies does not belong to be to the sidelines. Community should be in the center of our policies and operations, and we as MDVs, together with the governments, together with the private sector, really have all cooperate and coordinate work together to work as a partners with the joint goals.
Thank you, Olina, for highlighting the challenges facing the CSOs and also the challenge posed by the recent global crisis, including Ukraine, and how EBRD is really tackling this challenge through the civil society. Often, this crisis creates a vacuum where the role of the civil society are really needed more than ever to support the hard-to-reach communities and most vulnerable groups, as you have rightly mentioned, refugees, as well as other internally displaced people. So this is, I think, a very important role, and these civil societies are quite well known to have a comparative advantage in reaching out those communities. So it should be said that this is a very important area that really requires the attention of the policymakers as well as the decision makers of the global actors. So with that note, I would like also to give you one or 2 minutes to highlight how are you ensuring that the civil society organizations are really mainstreamed in your large investment programs, given that EBRD has significant number of infrastructure and also big mega programs that supports different countries that are your constituents. So please share with us 1 or 2 examples how you are mainstreaming and ensuring civil societies are included in your big projects that you are carrying out. Over to you, Olina.
Thank you, Dr. Abdi. As Her Excellency Naveen mentioned at the beginning of the opening remarks, that one of the sustainable development goals includes a strong partnerships, and business model of EBRD does include the partnerships at the core behind what we are doing. We strongly believe that working with like-minded institutions, with philanthropy foundations, with private sector, with donors, with civil society organizations, of course, with other MDBs and IFIs, will only, by doing this, we will only be able to achieve a bigger impact and scale up our operations on the ground. And partnerships with our civil societies are vital to help us achieve our mission. Because at the end of the day, we're all aiming to create a vibrant and healthy society, and partnerships, coordination and alignment between entities can foster new opportunities for growth, for greater positive impact, and making sure that really no one is left behind. Together with other MDBs, we're also working, and Dr. Abdi is very well aware about this, on finding the ways of how really we can mainstream civil society in the policy making and in our investment projects. So-called within the EBRD, we're calling this also the 3rd pillar, an equal partner to governments and private sector. At the EBRD, we have a motto that EBRD is changing lives through its investments, but eventually what we are doing, we are changing lives of the community. And it's only possible to do it by interacting at the 3 pillars on the ground, governments, private sector, and civil societies. And by doing any policy work, any strategies development, we always ensuring that we consult with our civil society partners. The same we are doing at the project level, of course, and we see, because those insights we really value. When our top management is traveling and our president is traveling to countries' operations, we also always include meetings with civil society organizations, so we can see and have a response from them, seeing what EBRD is doing well, what is BRD might improve in those countries. Their insights are really critically important because they're on the ground, and they the knowledge and information is very well important for us. Also, as I'm also heading a partnerships team, private sector partnerships in at the EBRD, since the beginning of launching this initiative, we started to develop and finding on the way of how we can create this healthy relations, productive relations with like-minded organizations, with philanthropies, and of course with civil societies. Again, to ensure that we're scaling up the impact on the ground, as we might not have enough capacity ourselves. We signed partnerships agreement with leading international institutions, NGOs such as Oxfam, Save the Children, Open Contracting Partnerships Networks, and others. I will give you a couple of examples. It's not only about signing MOU. For us, for me, it's really important to make sure that we have a very concrete capacity building projects on the ground. So with Open Contracting Partnership Network, we launched a couple of projects focusing on combating corruption, risk, inefficiency, and inequalities in public contracting in certain countries. With Oxfam, we are developing EBRD's refugees support program to integrate refugees and local women into economy and civil society by transferring skills, creating supportive community environment, and of course, addressing negative impact of COVID-19. In Jordan also, after the refugees influx due to Syrian war, the solid waste management sector was suffering increased demand due to additional population and waste generations, and together with Oxfam, we designed inclusive governance mechanism to promote sustainable solid waste management practices. With Save the Children now, we are developing a joint project in Egypt, focusing on awareness raising of railway safety crossing. It's to jointly with the Egyptian National Railways and with the government. Okay. But one more thing which I would like to say about the importance of partnership. Last week we had our civil societies program, and chairman of the DAC, it's emergency committee based in London. He was talking about importance of the partnerships, working with different private sector and public sector, and also philanthropies, on joining forces to build and help with the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. He's originally from Yemen, and he said that it's probably one of the best examples how the world should react on such crises happening in the world, by joining, by partnering together to stand for the for such war and crises in other parts of the world. So sorry, I understand we're running out of time, but
thank you, Olina. Thank you for your explanation, and we well noted with the final remarks on the collective efforts and coordination. Without concerted efforts, it will be difficult, if not impossible, to address the global challenge that we are facing today. Now, let me open the floor for our colleagues who have been patiently waiting for us and also to raise their well-thought questions and comments. So these are very important. We have a diverse speakers from the MBBs, from the government, from also the civil society organizations. So please, feel free to raise your questions. We have 10 minutes I can see Muruj is always looking at me as soon as we have passed the time that we have allocated for this session. But I think we will ask 10 minutes to deliberate and also raise questions. I already have some questions that are lining up. Please feel free to raise your hand and also to take the mic to raise the questions that you have. Let me now go some of the questions that have been raised by colleagues through the chat. Anyone who have raised their hand, please, Ishraq, alert me if there is anyone, as I cannot see my screen, that are raising their hand to make comments or questions or clarifications. Now, let me start with Daddy Kashinda, who is from Tunisia. Let me read the question that Daddy has raised. I represent the ASEDEJ organization, which I assume is a civil society organization. Thank you for the invitation for this great forum. I would like to know what action is the ISDB can take vis-a-vis organizations in order to remedy this economic situation created by the COVID-19 in relation to migration. So this is question specific to ISDB. And then the second question is raised by also another participant, which is, it is necessary to train activists in civil society to master community activation and achieve participatory diagnostic of target groups in order to launch projects that fulfill their expectation with their participations. Is there a program to improve the capability, which I assume the capacity of this activity, and to familiarize the civil society with the experience of many international organizations that have developed manuals for this purpose? So in other words, in summary, this question is related to the issue of capacity development and how the international organizations can support. So, Ishraq, if there are no any other questions, can I go back to the moderators? Are there any other questions?
We have one question as well. I will post it to you, Brother Abdi, but let's finish this first question.
The first question on IDB, we are, I think, working with civil society. Let me try to, before I answer that, I will come back to it, but let me first give the floor to our speakers to answer the second question, which is related to the capacity development of civil society organizations and how the international organizations such as MDBs can really support to enhance their activities and programs. So please feel free. Who's taking the floor? I can see already Dr. Atif is taking the floor. Please go ahead.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot for this question. In fact, I will reply in behalf of partially most, as we are creating kind of an ecosystem, including an academy for the NGOs, but also we have to we have to mention very important dimension for the capacity building of NGOs that currently, in fact, as we have the problem of food system as example, as a problem of sustainable use of resources needs kind of localization of the intervention. So perhaps we have to rethink that kind of capacity building we are providing in our program, kind of tailored capacity building, because in the past we were developing the capabilities of NGOs to manage projects and we give them the projects. Now we are requiring the NGOs to design new projects to work for the financial sustainability. So perhaps we can take example of what Mohsen Egypt is doing, is trying to mobilize a certain high rank of capacity building for enterprise, for social enterprise, for example, talking about financial sustainability of NGOs, talking about how can we mobilize. We created the first, what we call it, network for youth volunteers who are for economic empowerment. This is a national network which is composed currently of 14 NGOs who are training youth to become a mentor, to become an advisor. In fact, to capacity building the NGOs as well, it needs kind of a higher level of know-how. So we use different players not only we use a classical player like ILO, like other international implementing agencies, UN agencies and other, but also we try to use very professional financial institutions who are providing a little higher know-how for the business model. Now, we can't imagine any CSO or NGO who is not financially sustainable. So it's not enough to train them in how to design an initiative and how to manage the initiative, but also in how to resourceful and impactful. So partially, one of the elements which comes also with the capacity building is, as I mentioned during the intervention, that kind of digitalization. A lot of NGOs now are not using this kind of database sharing. With the example of what we mentioned, we are working on open government, open data. So we have to have the NGO as well able to take the data, to identify the challenges, and also to study the impact. So perhaps it is a good opportunity, this workshop, to mention that we need another generation of capacity building, which is higher than the classical one. Perhaps in Egypt, we try to tailor, so Ministry of Social Solidarity has a program where we tailor different types of capacity building, which is going normally beyond the classical one.
Thank you, Dr. Adif, for the clarification. Let me now give the floor. Olina is raising her hand to answer. Olina, for the interest of the timing, let me give you 1 minute to answer this question so that we have some other questions to take also.
I will be extremely short. I would mention that capacity building framework at the EBRD was launched almost 10 years ago, and with the intention to be proactive in building vibrant civil society in the country's operations. We are focusing on 4 pillars. It's gender and economic inclusion, it's sustainable development, governance, and we added 4th pillar focusing on digitalization. Most of our civil society capacity building projects are transactional. We are a privately led bank, so we are ensuring that all the projects that we are developing for civil societies are sustainable, but also we started to develop non-transactional projects, such as I was giving example on digital transformation of civil societies in Turkey and other countries. And this is something that we are doing in partnerships. So partnerships is really key to scale up these projects further.
Thank you, Olina. Thank you very much. Let me now combine the 2 questions about IDB, the one on the issue of COVID-19, and also the one related to the policies and procedures and strategies of the bank to deal with civil society engagement raised by Sayed Al-Sannari. So let me answer briefly in 1 minute. The Islamic Development Bank has developed its first ever civil society engagement policy, which is centered around mainstreaming the role of the civil society organizations, providing capacity development to strengthen their institutional capacity, like any other MDBs, to ensure that these civil society organizations in the member countries have the capacity to contribute to their national development plans and goals, and ensuring they play an active role. And finally, ensuring also that they diversify their financing sources of income, which really contributes to the heart of sustainability of the civil society organizations. And with that, the bank has introduced a significant number of programs, one of which His Excellency, the Vice President, Dr. Mansour, have mentioned, which is NGO Empowerment for Poverty Reduction Program, dedicated to support civil society capacity development and ensuring that they are really having the necessary capacity as well as the know-how to design programs and projects. And with regard to the COVID-19, the bank has designed a specific program dedicated for the civil society organization. Is called Tadamun CSO Pandemic Response Accelerator Program, which is purely run, managed, and benefited by the civil society organizations. So we are scaling up our support towards the civil society engagement. There is, with that note, I would like to give you the final question, which is raised by again our colleague from Sayed Al-Zinari. He is raising the question of how can we ensure the principle of leaving no one behind is applied the various projects implemented by CSOs, making the persons with special needs or people as an example. So I need one of you to share the light, at least from the government point of view and also from the MDB point of view. And then I will give the floor back to Muruj to take the remaining item of the agenda. Please go ahead. Anyone who wants to answer, please feel free to raise your hand from the speakers.
I can share a little bit from ADB perspective
Please go ahead.
on the leaving no one behind agenda, in particular for people living with disability. The ADB Social Protection thematic group has put together a framework for inclusion of people living with disabilities. And it's been several years already that we've had workshops and training with people who with the civil society groups from people living with disabilities. So including people living with disabilities as part of our policy discussion, training for us as staff. And we've recently collaborated with an institution, I think in the UK, that provide training to ADB project officers on how to design infrastructures and design in a way that is friendly to people living with disabilities. I think there's more to come for ADB, and as an institution, we're also working on the diversity and inclusion and belonging framework. So looking at ADB's policies and our framework on how we treat our staff with respect to people who live with disabilities and ADB's policies and things like that. So looking at our own institution as well as at operationally how we can support member countries in addressing the issues of people living with disabilities and having a framework and looking at protection issues, but also empowerment and inclusion of those living with disabilities so that they can be part of the policy discussions and designing of programs and projects that actually would affect their lives. So this is what we're doing to walk the talk and also to make sure that there's an impact at our program level. Thank you.
Thank you, Hare. Thank you very much for sharing with us the ADB prospect on this point. Let me give now to Atif and Olina. Atif, you have 1 minute, 60 seconds, if all the interest of the time, and Olina also have 60 seconds before I hand over to Muruj to take the other items of the agenda today. Go ahead.
I will just emphasize what our colleague mentioned, that we have different, we try to marry, to not let anyone behind. So we try to marry different initiatives together. So we focus in, once we talk about economic inclusion, we add people with disability and we add illiteracy. So all our program, which we start economic inclusion, we work for the illiteracy as well, because we have a high rate of illiteracy between poor people. We work in the defavorized poor areas. So we make that transaction in different areas, that each category of people who are not or historically related behind have the same comprehensive intervention. So the intervention will work on the mindset, will work on disability, certain mindset change like tourism, racism, things like this. We work also with a 12 value Her Excellency mentioned, and to change the mindset of people. We have a program of behavior change, comes hand in hand in all economic empowerment initiative, and we focus in areas where really we have that poorer area. We have 70% of our social network in Egypt are covered in poorer area and rural areas, sorry. So that let no one behind. It's really where we have multi-dimensional poverty. Egypt is implementing multi-dimensional poverty, taking care of health, education, and economic situation as well. That kind of comprehensiveness and the aspect, for the first time, this multi-dimensional poverty is very costly, but it serves also the cause of SDGs as well.
Thank you, Dr. Adif. Alina?
Leaving no one behind, and of course, gender and economic programs is the core of the BRD and backbone of what we are doing. Gender and economic strategy, we just launched a new one that was approved later last year. But in order to, during the development process, we undertook extensive consultations with civil society organizations across the region, really to get their insight of what are the elements to be included in the strategy. Diversity and inclusion programs are widely implemented at the BRD internally, and I have to say that our gender and inclusion team, led by Barbara Rambusek, you might know her because she's leading a lot of initiatives, on behalf of the bank is launching Academy today, exactly on diversity and inclusion program within the bank.
Thank you, Alina. Thank you, Alina. For the interest of the time, I would like. It has been a great, pleasure and honor to moderate this important session, which has really generated a very important discussion, and we have taken more than our time. That shows the interest and the engagement of this important topic and the participants. I would like to thank you all for the speakers for your excellent deliberation, suggestions, and also sharing your thoughts and experience. And I am sure that recommendations and the suggestions raised by your contributions will further strengthen our interventions to support hard to reach and most vulnerable groups and to strengthen the capacity of the CSOs. With that note, I would like to thank you once again for your excellent contribution, and I will now hand you over to Muruj to take the other parts of the agenda of the webinar to conclude. Thank you very much. So Muruj, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Abdi, for your moderation, and thank you for all the speakers. And it was very fruitful and useful to listen to the different perspectives from the different development actors. We still, by the way, if you wish to answer the questions, those that were not answered, you can still write the answers of the chat if you wish. I can see we have a lot of questions that came at the end of the panel, so you still can write and post the answers in the chat box. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you due to the time we have to move, and I would like now to invite the ISDB Director General of Global Practice, Mr. Amir Bokovic, to give the closing remarks of this webinar. Mr. Amir, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Muruj. Excellencies, Dr. Mansour Mukhtar, Vice President of Islamic Development Bank, and Ms. Niveen El-Kabaj, Her Excellency, Minister of Social Solidarity of Egypt, distinguished guests, brothers and sisters. It has been indeed a great pleasure and honor for ISDB to host this important webinar. I personally enjoyed in a wonderful and insightful discussion held today. This brought together key stakeholders and experts from governments, MDBs, development partners, UN agencies, civil society organizations, and private sector around the world. Having different speakers and participants certainly enriched the discussions and deliberations, for which I thank all of you. I'm delighted of the level of interest and commitment of our MDBs and sister development institutions, as well as our partner civil society organizations, to create a platform of dialogue and sharing best practices and experiences for civil society engagement and ensuring inclusive and sustainable development interventions in our respective member countries. I would like to thank all participants who joined this webinar and the speakers who share their approaches of better engagement with civil society. At the ISDB, we are striving to collaborate and partner with CSOs in line with core mandate and policies. Our operational strategy is considered as critical to equip our staff with the necessary skills and approaches to mainstream CSOs in development and humanitarian initiatives. I am sure that the good practices, experience, and lesson learned shared today will contribute to better community engagement, enhancing inclusiveness and sustainability of our operations, and therefore enhance the impact of our projects and programs, benefiting our communities and those most marginalized and in need in our respective member countries. I would like to thank all of you for sparing your precious time to take part in this important forum. I would also like to thank the RSD-ISDB civil society team for successfully conducting this online seminar. We are proud of you. Special thanks to TICA team for their excellent support to enable us to connect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amir, for the closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of this fruitful and enlightening webinar. And with that, I look forward to seeing you at the next CSO forum. Thank you very much. Shukran lakum wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Have a great day, everyone.